What's happening, everybody? Hope you're all well out there. Thank you for tuning in to the channel. I appreciate you. If you've never been here before, thank you for tuning in. There's plenty of videos to check out. Please hit the subscribe button. Everybody else, welcome back. Today, I'm going to read you a little story about what it's actually like to live in the prison system with the fellow prisoners. So I'm going to get right to the story. I hope you enjoy it. I wrote this while I was in prison. So some of the references you have to take into account that I was writing it while I was in prison. It's called Prison Reality. We're going to get right to it. Close your eyes, listen to the story, imagine that you're there. This is prison reality right here. This is as real as it gets. And for those of you that have never been here, I was in prison for 17 years straight. So let's get into the story. Prison reality. Contrary to the rumors that you hear, and the motion pictures that you have viewed on the prison system, the New York State prison system is occupied by a majority of so called men who conduct themselves like children, and more so like little girls. It's not like the old days of honor, respect, or criminal code once followed. Sadly, because of recent laws the Department of Corrections has put into place, like solitary, extended sentences, and loss of good time, these so called men get away with being rats. A prisoner who tells on another prisoner's actions. They get away with being disrespectful, and they get away with living in prison system like the punk ass bitches many of them are. Unfortunately, I am speaking about at least 90% of this prison that I currently reside in. In the old days, prisoners looked out for one another. They helped one another. They inspired one another. They were respectful and extended common courtesy to one another. But those days are long gone. During the 1920s through the 1970s, a man had to commit serious crimes to enter and become sentenced to the prison system. But as the 1980s rolled in and drugs like crack hit the streets in abundance, the prisons became filled with nickel and dime so called men who honestly believed that they were real criminals because they sold drugs on a street corner, committed small time robberies for money in a cash register, and believe that they are tough because they pulled the trigger on a gun. The reality is that anyone can pull the trigger on a gun. It takes no balls, no guts, no brains, but only takes about 1 pound of physical pressure to pull, and a 5 year old girl can do that. I'm not proud of my previous behavior on the streets, so I do not elaborate on its truth in boasting like some fool, but only to make a point. I was arrested over 11 times in my life, and all 11 for assaults in using my hands, assaults with a weapon, assault with a weapon on a police officer 3 separate times, and then murder, where I went knife to knife with a previous murderer who stood at 6'2", 250 pounds of muscle. This was up close and personal, hand to hand, knife to knife, and the result was a man laying dead with 81 stab wounds, along with 2 stab wounds in my own body. My life before incarceration was spent with men who stole millions. They took down armored cars. They imported, grew, and sold narcotics by the tons. Yes, literal tons. There was extortion, torture, and through it all, I always ended up in the local bars fighting men, not kids. With the seriousness of the men I was involved with, one mistake would cost me my physical life. One slip of the tongue, one sign of disrespect, one decision to do something my way instead of the proper way would result in extreme punishment or dismissal. The ignorance of the men around me mistake kindness for weakness, and they have no idea how a disciplined man and prisoner should carry themselves. I entered the prison system completely shocked by everything I discovered. Regardless of what facility I landed in, be it Sing Sing or Attica, I found the same mentality and behaviors. The signs and tremendous amount of disrespect from one prisoner to another are too extensive to list. In the dawn type setting of this facility, inmates will talk and shout in front of your cubicle area. They will have conversations 5 feet away from you as you're sleeping. They will play radios out loud after the lights are out. They will sing out loud after the lights are out and men are sleeping, ignorantly disturbing a man's mental and emotional escape as he leaves prison into the peaceful zone of sleep. These inmates will take your clothes out of the dryer as they are still wet, so they can put their own belongings in there to dry, without the balls to tell anyone or do it to your face. These so called men will stay on one of two available phones for hours, having no courtesy for their fellow prisoner who may need to call a loved one of their own. These inmates will shout just several feet away from you as you are on the phone, yet they complain when any of these things are done to them. These inmates adopt the attitude of, well, they do it, so I might as well do it as well. Naturally, this has a spiral effect, and the result is that nobody becomes a positive example on how to serve proper prison time. The inmates are so used to behaving in ignorance with no repercussions that they do not believe that one day someone may decide to have had enough of their behavior and just stab them in their throat or heart without saying a word first. We won't even get into the reality of how so many of them talk like women behind your back with no balls to come tell you anything to your face. Regardless of whether these so called men carry themselves in this fashion or not, I refuse to abandon my morals and values of being a prisoner and not an inmate. I refuse to own a radio that plays out loud, and I never listen to music without my headphones. I have never turned my typewriter on before 11 o'clock in the morning, and I have never used it after 10 o'clock at night. I fold people's clothes when taking them out of the dryer, regardless of whether I know the individual or not. I never talk after the lights are out. I do my best to make no noise when others are sleeping. And if others are in need of the phone as I am using it, I will actually cut my conversation short. That's me. That's my style. And it's called common courtesy, jerk off. At times, I thank God the Department of Corrections and New York State placed harsh laws into effect because many need to learn the hard way. It is those laws and my growth that have kept me from reacting. I won't even discuss the cleanliness issues and lack of habits that take place. Leaving hair in the sinks after shaving or cutting their hair, blowing their nose in the same sink that we wash our faces and brush our teeth in. This is what the free toilet paper is for my friends. I live in prison by feeding men who are hungry, typing lawyer and legal and parole letters for men who need assistance, helping fellow prisoners in any way I can, regardless if the individual is white, black, Spanish, and even if it's someone I may dislike. I help anyone I can. I was born and raised colorblind, so maybe this is why I judge each and every person as an individual. Are there some good men in prison? Absolutely. There are some good men in this housing unit I'm in right now. But sadly, they are few and far between. Because of this, I just do my best to remain alone. Many people may be naive and fall under the impression that I believe I may be better than others. My friends, if this is your impression, you are so far off base, it's a shame. I am always ready and willing to build a lifelong friendship with a prisoner, just not an inmate. I watch many of these men who have served 5, 10, 15, 20, and 25 years straight, yet live in complete blindness. This writing is not an attack on them. It's written to cause awareness, as I hope to instill change. Many center their lives around watching sports, knowing every player's statistics, as well as knowing their wives and their personal life. Yet they don't know the names of the parole commissioners who are responsible for their release. As men sit in front of the television day and night, watch movies, and wait to stare at just a glimpse of a woman's ass, they create no plan for their release at the same time. I watch as men use their limited money to buy pornographic books instead of buying food to eat. My time is used to read knowledge, prepare for parole, prepare others for parole, help other prisoners, participate in the youth assistance program, establish ties and connections in the outside communities, study religion, politics, and psychology. So, what I want you to get from that is that there are a tremendous amount of men in prison who act like they have no care in the world. I lived with such ignorance. I lived with such incompetence. I lived with people that were so naive that it was the hardest part about doing time. When people ask me, Fish, what was the hardest part about doing time? I say, besides missing my family, besides missing the free world, which is obvious, it was the animals I had to live with. The constant screaming, the constant noise, the constant stupidity, the constant ignorance, the constant blame that they blamed everyone in the world and took no personal responsibility. You couldn't imagine living with that. You couldn't imagine living with that. It was one of the hardest parts about doing time. The correctional officers were a breeze. If you had any brain, they were so easy to work around. They were so easy to get around. If you had any street smarts, you could just move correctly and you're hardly ever bothered. Yeah, there was a rare exception where an officer went out of the way to harass you, but they were so easy to get around for the most part. The hardest part was the animals that I lived with. Were there some good guys in prison? Yes, there were some good guys in prison, but they were few and far between, like I explained in the story. Most of these guys were so pathetic, so stupid, so ignorant, so dirty, so loud that living with them was like being in the Twilight Zone. You don't ever want to go into that system. You don't ever want to be trapped with people like that. You don't ever want to be locked in prison with a majority of guys that seem like they can care less that they're even there because they're living better in prison than they were living in the free world. That's true for a lot of them. This is what you'll be subjected to when you go in the prison system. It's a nightmare. A nightmare. See you guys later.